The pale morning sunlight glanced off the conference table, making the scratched veneer glimmer, but even that faint brightness felt harsh under the committee's fluorescent glare. Behind a row of thick spectacles and pursed lips, Professor Mehra read my application aloud, voice flat as lint. My portfolio, a swirl of sketches stuffed into an old folio, leaned, ignored, against his hip. A degree in fashion design, he enunciated the words like they were spiked with disbelief. A trickle of sweat traced my spine. They all watched me, Mehra with his stuffed grey moustache, Dr. Gokhale tight bun, perpetually frowning. And two others, names already lost to anxiety. In the seat next to me, a boy sniffled, nose buried in his own sheaf of artwork. "Tell us, Mr. Pandey," Dr. Gokhale began, tapping a folder, "what makes you think this is a viable path in Mumbai? The competition is, well, unreal." My answer waited, words rehearsed all night, but their faces made them shrivel mid-birth. I cleared my throat. "I believe design can come from anyone, anywhere." Professor Mehra snorted. "It's not about belief, it's about proof." He riffled through my sketchbook, shaking a detailed lehenga sketch free, red and gold, marigolds curling along the hem. "No formal training, only self-study, a few local tailoring jobs, and your mother's sari scraps." He raised his eyebrows, the lines etching themselves deeper. I didn't glance at my folded hands. If I did, I'd see my plaited calluses, the thin fingers caked with charcoal and fabric glue. I mustered a careful nod. Dr. Gokhale slid my portfolio away, closing it with a sigh. "Your enthusiasm is better spent elsewhere, son. Our program is," she groped for the right word, "selective. We need candidates who offer more than passion. We're sorry." But it was clear they weren't. Outside, under a fraying neem tree, I sat casting the hard edge of my knee into the mud, feeling Mumbai's humid sprawl close in. The cacophony of rickshaws, honking motorcycles, and crows strung my ears worse than the lecture inside. I didn't cry, not even later, when I staggered home, portfolio under my arm, and pressed the news to my mother in our tiny one-room flat overlooking the railway. She pursed her lips too, but her eyes softened. "Your uncle's son, Vikram, got into engineering," she said eventually. "Maybe you could try again next year in something more suitable. You're good with numbers, Beta." For weeks my uncle's words lived in my skull, 1,000 subtle cuts. "Pandikar ladka or fashion," he jeered from across the uneven table at dinner, every syllable dripping with mockery. "This one wants to stitch blouses, not earn a real living. Beta, do you know what rent is in Mumbai?" His laughter infected everyone. My cousin Vikram shook his head, mouth full of dal. "Try banking, Arjun, at least you might get married someday." I forced a tight smile, forked a piece of chapati and kept quiet. My mother watched everything, her thumb rubbing her gold chain over and over. For months I drifted between odd tailor jobs, fixing torn school uniforms for bored aunties or adding sequins to cheap saris. Even my friends chuckled behind my back. "Next Manish Malhotra hai na," they'd say, shaking their heads. My sketches, my rambling monologues about shape and drape, the mess of fabric in our small flat, just fodder for their grins and my uncle's whispers. Beneath all the humiliation, anger pooled, hot and sour. Still, quietly, serenity flickered somewhere deep. Every evening, as the city grew violet and crows roosted, I'd unfold a scrap of cloth and lose myself in the hush of the sewing machine. Years scraped by, the failed entrance exam became a family anecdote, proof of my creative brain, always said with air quotes. My sister followed Vikram into software, my friends joined local businesses, mouths set into satisfied lines. I mended, stitched, and saved. Sometimes, when the world slept, I let myself imagine something better, garments that belonged on a runway, not a wedding tent. Then, 6 years after the committee grinned down on me, the city changed for me yet again. That morning, I hunched in the workshop of Mr. Karim, a tailor patching gold brocade to a sari border while televisions in every shop window blared news of a new fashion incubator downtown. An open competition, winner gets an exclusive contract. Everyone could apply. That night I sat up pacing as my mother slept, cutting and recutting a midnight blue silk. I heard again Dr. Gokhale's sigh, my uncle's barking laughter, Vikram's easy derision. I laid out my ideas, pinning hopes to each side seam, each hand-stitched motif. Then, blinking in the glow of our battered tube light, I finished the application online and pressed send. It took weeks for them to get back. The city ran on the old rhythm in that time, trains screeching in the distance, fruitwallahs shouting in the lanes, sweat-sticking shirts to backs as the May heat built up like a fever. I stitched hundreds of school skirts and mended trousers for office clerks, but every minute my mind sparked with hope and with the memory of past failures. On the day I got the email, plain, businesslike subject line only. Shortlisted finalist, incubator program, the world split open, sharp as the citrus edge of lime pickle. I read it twice, disbelieving. You've been selected, Arjun, my mother's voice cracked as she read the screen over my shoulder. My uncle, summoned by my mother's excited call, scoffed. Probably a scam, Arjun. If it's real, what do they want? Money. Don't give anyone your bank details. That night alone, I reread the mails. I remembered every slight, every shrug, every mocking designer barber, and I drafted my designs again, exhaustively diagramming a collection called Danak, Rainbow, because that's what Mumbai was to me. Wild, jumbled, beautiful, with grit under its fingernails. The incubator was real, so was the competition. In that freezing, glass-walled room, I stood before 30 judges and just as many hopefuls, some portfolio fat and jargon fluent, others like me, hands rough as sandpaper and heart hammering against their shirts. I didn't mention my failures. I showed my sketches, breathed, blue like Juhu dawns, mirrorwork for the city's glitz, hems edged like marine drive after rain. I brought out every handmade choli and translucent dupatta, all hand-stitched and bead-set in the stifling warmth of my flat. They listened, really listened. When my name was called Pandi Arjun, incubator winner, I didn't cry. Later in the half-empty lobby I did, softly shoulder shaking into my borrowed blazer, what no one saw. The endless cups of tea my mother poured as I sewed through the night, the months of learning Photoshop on a cracked phone, the years of rejection folding themselves, origami-like, into resolve. By winter, my first show was set. The city's fashion elite, flashbulbs, editorials, my hands trembled through every fitting, models eyed my label, brow raised, always asking about the new name from Kemba. Even the panel of judges seemed skeptical as I unfurled black silk and copper thread. But people loved it. Critics called it fresh, rooted but audacious. The contract became a partnership, a storefront in Bandra, 2 assistants, articles, interviews, interviews, interviews. Success glimmered, but serenity, deep and bone-felt, is quieter. I kept to my routines, tea with Ma, random sketches stuffed between receipts, patching uncle's shirts when they split at the elbow, even as my name was spelled out in magazines. 4 years later, now 10 since my first rejection, the city and my place in it had shifted again. When the Mumbai Times called about a feature, they sent a photographer who seemed barely older than my cousin Vikram. "We'll need someone local for colour," the reporter said. "Family's always good." I hesitated, the wounds now faded, still twinged at the edges, but something inside me, it was half pride, half forgiveness, said yes. The house felt both stunted and brutally familiar, the leatherette sofa my uncle never repaired, neon Ganesh posters above the battered Godrej cupboard. My mother wore her best maroon sari. Uncle straightened his shirt, glowering at the camera. Vikram slouched in the corner, tapping his phone, though he kept his gaze on me, curious and uncertain. "So, what's different about your clothes, Arjun?" the reporter asked, gently prodding. I knelt in the middle of the cramped living room and unzipped a garment bag, the same folio that once held my rejected sketches, except this time it cradled silk, cobalt, saffron, emerald. I unfolded each carefully, laying them on the tea table. "This one debuted at Lakme," I said, fingers running over marigold beadwork. "Priya D'Souza wore it at the finale." I opened my tablet to Vogue, flicked to the backstage photograph, the same lehenga, radiant even in pixels, turning critics' heads. My uncle, eyes gone round, stared. "That's our balcony there in that article." My mother smiled, tears trembling but unfallen. The neighbours crowded at the door, whispering. "Designer Pandi Ki Gar main press," someone hissed, the thrill of recognition close and sticky. I watched Vikram's face as the reporter snapped photos, his mask of superiority shifting, uncertain, as if realizing for the first time that what I'd made was real, was valued. The proof, concrete and dazzling as a fireworks show, was on that table, garments that had started as laughter, rejection and sleepless nights. Later, as dusk slid over Mumbai, I slipped out to the balcony. It was muggy. The city's heartbeat thumped, the metallic clang of trains, vendors hoarse from a day's shouting. My uncle joined me after a minute, hands jammed in his pockets. "You really did it, Arjun," he muttered, suspicious, as if I might vanish if he said it too loud. I looked out at the sprawl, the rusty water tankers, the glowing windows, the endless ebb and flow. "I did." He grunted, then added, "Next family dinner, you're bringing one of those fancy lehengas for your aunt." We both laughed, awkward at first, the sound growing lighter with every second. Anger, I realize, doesn't disappear, it weathers. Serenity, though, fills the spaces anger leaves behind. Inside, my mother bustled with tea, newspaper reporters scattered throughout the room, my cousins' questions cautious but persistent. I let them come, sweet, bashful, and a little awed, every word a small return, a circle closing, and when the last flashbulb popped, I slipped the lehenga back into its bag, heart beating as steadily as my old, battered sewing machine. The city, a wound and a wonder, thrummed under my feet. This time I belonged.